Okay, I think we're live. I think we're live, and I've suddenly gone into an Irish accent for some reason, and I don't know why. So let's see who's in before we do anything. Helen Hall is first because she thought it was at 6:30 because she's a dumbass. We've got Michael Askew. I like saying this. We've got the Vaping Vegan Bushcraft Off-Grid Toker family in. Yes. Please come in, all my love saying your name. Anti-Vegan Nonsense is here. VegMet Codboard, I can say that quick. Satan Inside, hello there, mate. Grumpy Vegan Grandad's in the house. Hello, you're looking gorgeous today, you fella. Absolutely gorgeous. And we're nearly at the bottom. Ekaterina Marinova, hello there. Charlotte, hello there. Chris Grant, hello. Yeah, we've got a nice mix in. Vegan Pixie Warrior, thank you for joining us. You've managed to join us because you're editing software on your better halves computer, and it's a better computer, so that's why you've made it today. I know that for sure. So I'm Grumpy Vegan Grandad. For those of you who don't know, you've either been living under a rock or in a cave like Sperridge. Introduce yourself, Michelle.
I think just about everyone in the chat knows me.
Yeah.
But I'm Michelle Lowe. I've got a YouTube channel that's imaginatively named Michelle Lowe, and I'm here tonight to educate Grumpy Vegan Grandad on science and how to debunk scientific studies.
Let's see if this works. Do you notice anything about me, Michelle?
What?
There's something different about me. Do you know? Can you tell what it is?
No. You've had a haircut?
Yeah.
Yay!
I've had a different style today. I've had it sort of more bald on top and less bald on the sides today. So it's all the Raj at the moment in the in the pre-geriatric circles.
I could do with losing a bit of hair, honestly.
Don't try and make me feel jealous now.
Thick.
Right, well listen, the reason we're here, people, is I was having a conversation with my arch nemesis, a good friend of mine, Chris, and what we do, we have to and fro's. He's very sort of, he asked me a lot of questions about veganism, but he's still not there yet. I don't think he'll be there for a while. He likes lifting weights. He does that weightlifting stuff, the circuit stuff. He's really strong guy, really nice guy, fellow actor, but unfortunately can't see the light side. He just will not come on to the light side. And what happens is he keeps throwing me things. I mean, the latest thing he threw over to me was the Paul Saladino Joe Rogan interview, and I explained to him, I says, look, Paul Saladino is a psychiatrist, he's not a nutritionist, and yeah, but he's come across with some really good points, and he keeps sending me stuff like these studies, and I keep saying, Chris, these studies are flawed, and he says to me, why are they flawed? Well, I can't answer him because I don't know why. I've just been told they're flawed, but I can't explain why, which just completely throws my argument into the bin, you know. So that's one of the reasons. But the thing is with me is I've heard you mention it before, Michelle. I'm the same. I'm very much sort of undiagnosed ADHD. I know there's something not right. I can read when I make the effort to read, but I throw the instruction book away and play. Or if I'd have had YouTube when I was 18 years old, I would have been a brain surgeon now, because I learn so much from watching. But when I pick up a study and have a look at it, this is what it looks like to me, right? That's what a study looks like to me. But I can learn. I mean, for example, there was an egg study done which said that eating eggs every day will not increase your cholesterol. If I'd have read the study, I wouldn't have known where to start with it. But Vegan Gains explained it, and Mike the Vegan explained it, and I can now explain it. And the facts are with the egg study is that the people they used in the study were meat eaters. and the cholesterol would have been at the top end, which is 4 or 5. Once your cholesterol reaches like 4 or 5, it doesn't move much further than that. It slows down. So when they fed these people eggs, they didn't see any increase in cholesterol. However, if they had used me in the study with my cholesterol score of 2.2 and fed me eggs every day, you would have seen my graph go like that. It would have shot up. So I get that. And it's the same with eating cholesterol. Show me the study and I won't be able to explain from that study. However, people have explained it, and we make our own cholesterol. When we eat extra cholesterol, our body can't deal with it, and we end up getting atherosclerosis once our cholesterol is above a certain level. Once that starts, we start getting fatty deposits in our arteries. Once they close up so much, that's what causes a heart attack. Or if one of these bits of fatty deposits plaque stuck to our artery walls breaks off and goes round to our brain, that's what causes a stroke. You know, so I do understand it when it's explained to me in a visual manner. However, I fall down when I'm faced with literature. And that's why, Michelle, I've got Michelle on today. And it's not to defend the plant-based or vegan diet. It's for Chris, my friend, it's to stop him going on a carnivore diet. Maybe. He's not going to do that, but if he said to me, I'm thinking about going on the carnivore diet, I'd say, don't do that, it's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Look at this study. This study says that going on the carnivore diet is okay. I can't get that study and say, Chris, look, but this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And that's what I want to do. I want to be able to rubbish what comes at me rather than defending what I know already. So there we have it. That's the premise of getting Michelle on today.
Cool. So, yeah, the reason why I think why Danny's chosen me is because I've been battling the carnies using science, but telling what the nonsense they spout, and then coming on YouTube and telling everybody why that's nonsense and why it's flawed. So what I'm trying to do today, I've got some studies, but I'm not going to go through the studies. I'm going to show you why they're flawed. So I've actually chosen a number of studies. I'm not going to go through them all. I'm just going to pick kind of one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, what I've chosen is dead recent studies on cholesterol and saturated fat from 2020. I haven't seen any of these studies before. They're brand new to me. And I've just skim read them just to make sure that they're appropriate for the conversation, right? And they're literally just off Google Scholar. They're the first ones that came up from 2020. Now, in relation to Chris, and let's use the example of Chris, I'll say how I would counter it, how I would point out the studies are flawed using the papers that I've collected. Now, the first thing I'd want to know, though, is how much does Chris actually know? Like, can he read the study? Does he have a background, or does he just pick?
No, what he does is similar to me. I mean, for example, if someone said to me, like this one, let me share the screen. Something like that one. No, that one says, I've had a quick skim read of that. It's basically saying 1 egg a day will not cause heart disease, which right. I suppose probably wouldn't. Maybe not. I don't know. But no, he has no experience in reading studies. He wouldn't be able to read the studies. But he's saying, well, this doctor, let's say Saladino,
right?
Paul Saladino has said, this study says, he's a doctor. You're not a fucking doctor, Danny. He says this study says this. So then it's down to me to say, well, no, this is why. Otherwise, I've got to concede. I cannot come back to him, and that's the problem we have. And I'd rather just not go on that conversation. I mean, everybody out there, you should all watch this and sort of try and take something yourself. I mean, I really don't want to go down this route at all, but just having that little bit of knowledge of being able to find out who's funded it and stuff like that, and finding just basic flaws in it would be enough to speak to somebody who has no idea themselves. Just make you a bit more legitimate about what you're saying, because it's all about, you get a lot of people saying bias. Oh, you're biased, you're biased because you're vegan. That's a vegan study. Well, how can I say it's not a vegan study? How can I say the doctor's not a vegan? It's just all these little things that they try and pick. I've got to try and answer.
Right. So what I'll do then is I'll start off with the hierarchy of evidence. So I'm assuming that some people in the chat will be familiar with the hierarchy of evidence.
I think I've seen it as well.
Yeah. Now, if I can share my screen.
So I think what you do is click your screen and I have to put it up for you. So it'll pop up on mine. Yes, it's popped up now. So I can add that to the stream.
Right, okay. So now, hold on, right, let me get rid of that. So I can go on to that. And then can I go on my application window?
Try it. Let's see. Any questions, guys? Save them till after we've done this little bit.
Hold on. Come out and then go back in.
Yeah, I think you might have to. Let's have a go at that. There we go. Right, I can see that now. Yes, perfect.
Right. So this is the hierarchy of evidence. So the hierarchy of evidence is just a guide that tells us roughly the strongest studies, type of studies, versus the weakest type of studies. So if somebody comes along and a study that they wave in front of you isn't on this pyramid, then you can debunk it by saying it's not a proper study. So if somebody comes into my comments section and says they've got some evidence about whatever, like I had one earlier on this week about cholesterol, I think, and gave me a YouTube video as his evidence. So anybody who comes along with anecdotes or YouTube videos or something they've heard from somebody, right, automatically debunked. What you want is for them to give you a peer-reviewed academic study, right? So a peer-reviewed study is published in a journal that's a reputable quality. So any nutrition journal, you know, if Chris has pulled a nutrition journal off and sent it to you, well, yeah, that's a peer-reviewed study. But how good is that study? So if it's something like just somebody's letter, right, because you can write a letter to the editor of a journal and get it published. If it's just a letter or someone's opinion, well, that's only one step above somebody's personal anecdote. Yeah, that person might be a doctor, but it's just their opinion. So I've got one here, which is an opinion piece.
When you say anybody can write this, so I could do this, I could write a letter, or do you have to have an academic qualification to?
No, anybody. Technically, anybody could write a letter to a journal. I'm looking for it. I've got one. Hold on.
Hang on a minute. Someone said, "Is the one underneath the banner?" So I'll get rid of the banner. Right, I'll get rid of the banner. We don't need the banner on. Okay. David Gardell, no, there isn't one under the banner.
No. I'm just looking for my. You see, this is the problem with me. Right, here we go. Can you see this one? Oh no, I'll have to come out and share again. It's annoying StreamYard when it does this. Right.
I have a question. Can you recommend a site we can go to get peer-reviewed studies? Is that Google Scholar, Michelle?
What?
can you recommend a site we can go to get peer-reviewed studies?
Google Scholar. So if you type in to Google Scholar whatever keyword you want, it will give you mainly peer-reviewed studies, mainly. But you just have to kind of open up the link just to check that it's from a reputable source, because sometimes Google Scholar will pull up.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do, Michelle. We'll go into that after we've done this bit. We'll go into that after. So if you stick around, Vegan Teacher, we'll do that. We'll have a look.
So this is published in the American Journal of Medicine, so a highly reputable journal.
Right.
So Chris might come upon this and say, oh, look, somebody's saying in this reputable journal that we need to rethink this idea that saturated fat and meat is bad, because it's 50 years ago since Ansel Keys published the 7-country study. That's the one that triggered all the research on cholesterol.
Yes.
But when you look at it, all it is that. It's just his opinion, right? So what's the point in that? There's no data, there's no evidence, really. It's just an opinion piece. So that's the lowest. It doesn't matter if it's published in a reputable journal, right? Anybody could write that with a bit of knowledge about research. Anybody could write that, send it into a journal, and theoretically speaking, at least, get it published.
Okay, but to me, Michelle, that looks like a study, because if you scroll down,
exactly,
that you've got all these references. So that to me is, this guy's looked at all these things and he's come to that. So that is, to me, looks like a study.
But it's not a study.
Right.
A study is something, a piece of work that has actually done an experiment or has collected data from participants and done some analysis, which I'm going to come on to in a minute.
Okay.
Or they've reviewed the area, so they've taken a lot of studies and reviewed them, but they've done it in a systematic way. So they haven't just cherry picked; they've done it, but considering both sides of any particular argument. Whereas this, all they've got is a really small number for an academic piece of work, 13 references, and they're all in support of this person's opinion. So we don't know whether they've cherry-picked 13 from equally biased opinions. Those 13 studies, those 13 references might not be actual studies. They might be similar opinion pieces from this guy's mates.
Right.
So unless there's any data, this is the lowest possible level of hierarchy of evidence. This is only one step above someone sending you a YouTube video and telling you that's evidence. So you can disregard anything that doesn't have data and hasn't been done in a systematic way, and it's just an opinion piece. You can disregard it. You can say, no, that's flawed because it's just an opinion. There's no data here. There's no evidence here that something, that something original has been looked at in an unbiased way. This is just biased. This is as biased as Bart Kay's YouTube videos. So, if we go back to the hierarchy of evidence, I'm going to have to, you're going to have to share this again for me.
Okay, it's all right, no problem. We'll just keep doing it this way. It works fine.
Okay, so now we've got a little bit better lines of evidence. Where's my hierarchy of evidence gone? There it is, right? So animal trials and test tube studies, right? So if they send you a study that's on mice, or they send you a study that has looked at chemicals in a test tube, you can disregard that, because anything that's been conducted on mice is only the very slimmest starting point. So if somebody sends you a study that's looked at the effects of, I don't know, oxalates, let's say, right, because the carni is always so oxalates at us, has looked at the effects of oxalates on mice and has shown that mice have a really bad effect when they're given oxalates, well, you can disregard it because it's on mice. So you can say, look, I want to know how it affects me, and I'm not a mouse. So animal trials, in science, animal trials are just like the starting point. They're like just to test whether something, they imagine something's like, going to be safe for humans. Like vaccines, for example, like the vaccine for COVID. They've already tested them on animals, and they have to. That's part of the development of any medication. Unfortunately, that is still the case. But we know that animal trials are so flawed. We don't even know whether, if an animal trial has proved safe, then we like tentatively test it on humans. We still might find that it's not safe for humans, although it's been safe for animals. So any study that they throw at you about nutrition that's been done on any animal other than humans, you can disregard it as being flawed, right?
Okay.
The next line up, these two, cross-sectional studies and case control studies, they're like taking people just at one moment in time, and they might compare like people with heart disease and people who don't have heart disease. And they'll test them on some, I don't know, a range of variables. But just doing that one moment in time, well, we can't control anything about those people, right? We might have a sample of 100 people, say, who've had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then we've got 100 people who haven't had a heart attack. And we might find no differences between them because, well, we don't know anything about those people. We don't know anything about their lives. We don't know anything about the exercise level. We don't know anything about the diet they've got other than at that one moment in time. So if anybody sends you any data and it's just got two groups of people and they've not done any analysis controlling for certain variables, and I'll show you what I mean in a sec, then that's flawed. Yes, it's scientific in the sense that an experiment's been done, so some empirical data has been collected, but it's just not very good data.
So why do they do them then? If they're not accurate?
Sometimes they do them because maybe they've only got limited funding, or they're just starting out in a new area, so they might start with low-level studies first of all, just to see if they can find anything. Usually these lower-level studies, like these animal trials, are probably done at the beginnings of clinical research, so to look at a new vaccine or to look at a specific molecule with a mind to developing a drug. Right, usually that's why animal trials are done.
So it could be like toothpaste and stuff like that. People who want to produce a toothpaste.
Yeah. So a new toothpaste brand would, in some countries, even things like toothpaste and makeup have got to go through animal trials first. Like in China, like makeup and toothpaste, toiletries cannot be sold unless they've gone through animal trials. That's not the same in all countries now, fortunately. But medications, definitely, drugs, definitely, they have to go through animal trials. So these lower level studies do have their place, but if we're talking about nutrition, which is really difficult to study anyway, then you can automatically just tell Chris it's an animal study. Look, this is just and he'll say, no, well, what about this one? This is a human study. And you can say, well, yeah, but they've just taken a group of people from the gym and asked them what they ate, and then had a look to see who's had a heart attack and who hasn't. Well, how do we know anything about those people? We don't know. We don't know whether they smoke. We don't know whether they might take exercise because they're going to a gym, but we don't know anything about their past.
They might be taking steroids.
Exactly.
So will they have cohort study, case control studies written on them?
No, you have to look at the methodology. So we'll get to cohort studies because these cohort studies, randomized control trials, and then meta-analyses are the three highest level types of study.
Right.
So these are the ones that when people debate nutrition, like Vegan Gains debates nutrition, he'll pull up what we call prospective cohort studies, or randomized control trials, or meta-analyses, because these are higher level studies. It doesn't mean to say, though, because they're a higher level study, that they're a good study. And
Yeah.
I'll show you some examples, right? Because there's other ways, there's many ways in which a study can be flawed, even if it's up here in this highest level of evidence,
Okay.
right? So cohort studies, prospective cohort studies, those are the epidemiological studies. So what they do is they follow a huge amount of people, right? From, you know, probably a diverse, they'll look at thousands of people, right? And they'll follow them for several years. And then what they'll do is let's say they follow them for 5 years. And at the beginning of the study, they'll have taken a whole range of measures like the diet. And one of the flaws with this is food questionnaires, but I'll come on to that. Mm-hmm. They'll take a load of, like, they might take health measures, you know, exercise, like all sorts of measures, right? That they'll then use in 5 years' time when they actually come to do the study. So they'll follow these people for 5 years, and then just by chance, some of those people will have had a cardiovascular event, right? Some of them might have developed angina, some of them might have had a heart attack, some of them might have had a stroke, some of them might have been diagnosed with atherosclerosis. So they've got some level of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
So researchers then will say, right, this group of people have had a cardiovascular event. What is different about them than the people that haven't?
Right.
And they might be interested in looking at cholesterol or fat, or so what they'll do is they'll go back to the nutrition data that they've got, that they've already collected, and then they'll analyze the differences between them. So if I take one of these, I'll take this one, I think. No, I won't.
I've got a really itchy eye at the moment. What's going on?
You've got an itchy eye?
I've got something in it.
I should have labelled these properly.
I didn't expect you to be organised, Michelle.
I'm not organised. I'm not organised at all. I'm not
you can tell how organised a woman is by the way she cooks. Say nothing more than that.
Right. Okay. It's got to be this one then.
Oh, there's a few extras in while we're waiting for Michelle to get organised.
Right. This isn't one of the higher level prospective cohort studies, because they're like a nightmare to interpret. So I'll show you an example of what a prospective cohort study will find. I think that'll be the easiest thing to do. So
are we all learning, people? Are we all learning?
I can't see the chat, so I've no idea what people are saying.
We're going to be testing you all later. Get your pens and pencils ready.
There's an exam on this later. In the form of quiz, like those VPIs do.
You'll get detention if you don't get 9 out of 10 right.
All right, so this one. So this is just looking at the existing data. So this isn't a prospective cohort study, but it's taking the results of prospective cohort studies and just having a look at them, right? So what a prospective cohort study will do, if let's say they've got a group of people who've had a heart attack in the 5 years that the study's been conducted, and then those that aren't, they'll do a statistical analysis, usually some kind of statistical analysis that will generate what we call odds ratios. So in the results section of the prospective cohort study, what it will give you is maybe a table or a diagram like this, which details the odds ratios. So what we'd say is let's say the people who've had a heart attack, they might have, and we're looking at the effects of saturated fat, they might have, let's say, just for example, an odds ratio of 0.2. And that'll mean that there's a 20% increased risk in those people of having a heart attack.
Okay.
They've done all the number crunching, and they've said, okay, let's if we take someone who is eating the same way as these people, right, who've had a heart attack, they've got a 20% increased risk. Based on the data that we've got, they've got a 20% increased risk. Now, that's not necessarily a very good study, and I'll show you for why. Now, as I said, this study isn't a prospective cohort study, but this is showing some data that has come from them, right?
Okay.
So this is saying, if we have got saturated fat and we replace some of the saturated fat in the diet with trans fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, carbs from sugars, or carbs from whole grains, right? What will happen, right? So these are risk ratios. So what you can see in here is the change in risk. So if you on heart disease, right? So based on the results of prospective cohort studies, if you replace 2% of the saturated fat with trans fats, then it increases the risk by around 5%, which is nothing.
So you're looking at that coloured bar there. That's what, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But what you've got here is a massive confidence interval, right? So this is, on average, 5% risk. But this is telling me that it's non-significant. It's a nonsense finding, because it could be that it's way back here, which is a decreased risk.
Right.
Or it could be way up here, which is a massively increased risk. Or it could be here, which is no increased risk at all, which is no difference. So if the confidence interval, like the confidence I have in that finding, right, crosses zero, it basically means there's a chance it's not 5% increased risk, there's a chance it's none. There's no increased risk. And there's even a chance it could be a decreased risk, or a massively increased. We just don't know. It's a nonsense finding. It doesn't make sense. So if Chris comes along with a prospective cohort study, and he says, and if you're not sure, ask him to explain it to you. Right? That's what I do. If I want to know how much they know, I'll ask them to explain it to you.
Yeah.
So if he says, right, these are people who've been followed for 5 years, and it's shown that the more meat they eat, the less likely they are to have a heart attack. And you think, I don't believe that. So you say, all right then, what was the chance? What was the risk? What was the risk level? So he might have the knowledge, and he might say, okay, right, the odds ratio was 5%. There was a 5% chance. So then you say, well, what were the confidence intervals? Right, that's all you need to say. What were the confidence intervals? So then he has to go along and say, oh, well, they were between minus whatever and plus whatever. But if they've crossed zero, you can automatically say that's nonsense, because I can't be confident that there's no difference whatsoever. And it's incredible how many studies are published that have got some finding, but then when you look at it, and you only need to look at the confidence intervals, and it tells you what they are. It actually labels it confidence interval, right? Or it does it in a graph like this, and you just look at these bars and you say, well, it's cross zero, so it's nonsense. However,
right. So if you go down to that blue one there, the bottom one of, so that confidence interval doesn't cross 0, and it says from -5 to -20.
Yeah.
So that's a very small. So the smaller the line, the black line,
right. So this one, carbohydrates from whole grains. So let's say we replace 5% of our energy, 5% of our calories, right, that would have been from saturated fat, with carbohydrates from whole grains.
Yeah.
Right. This bar here is my finding, is my risk difference, and I'm reducing my risk of a heart attack by 10%.
Right.
Right? Because it's in the minus numbers. So if it's in the minus numbers, it's reducing the risk. If it's in the plus, it's increasing the risk. Now, my confidence intervals here are these ones. So they've gone from about 2 to about 15.
15, 16%. Yeah.
Right? So even though it's 10%, like the finding's 10%, there is a chance it could be as low as a reduction of 2%, or it could be as high as a reduction of 15%.
So to me, that says that if you replace with carbohydrates from whole grains, it's going to be beneficial to you.
Yes. There's a benefit. It could only be a small benefit, or it could be a larger benefit. You see, the thing is, we have to have these confidence intervals because we have to take into account some things that maybe weren't included in the study. So good studies will take into account things like smoking, exercise, other dietary things, but we can't possibly take into account everything, right? We don't know everything that people are doing. We can't possibly know that, can we? We can't possibly say what other things people are doing. So we have to take some things as for granted, really. So that's why we have confidence intervals that we're saying, well, for some people, maybe who live a really unhealthy lifestyle, or there could be genetic differences. Some people are genetically susceptible to heart disease.
We just cut off then, Michelle. Well, I did anyway. I don't know whether it cuts off from everybody else, but mine just cut off.
Oh, did it?
I don't know whether it cut you off. Did it cut Michelle off that, or was it just me who went like that? Don't know. Sorry, Michelle. Yeah, it's been doing it intermittently, this.
All right. I could see myself moving on the screen, so I don't think it was me. Right, so what we have to do is we take these confidence intervals because we have to take into account the fact that some people, regardless of them changing the diet in some way, that they're just going to be unhealthy for some other reason, right? The researchers might have taken into account things like smoking and exercise and stuff like that, but there's always things that the researchers can't take into account of, right? And some people might lie as well. Right? Yeah. Some people might be secret smokers, or they might have the odd fag, or they might have the odd drink that they're not admitting to, right?
Yeah.
Or there's genetic differences. Some people are just genetically more predisposed to heart disease than other people, right? So maybe for some people there's only going to be a very small reduction in the risk, and that's these people here. But for some people, there's going to be a bigger difference. Maybe, they have a healthy lifestyle anyway. They take lots of exercise. They're genetically gifted in that they don't have any genes that predispose them to heart disease. So they'll get a better benefit of changing from saturated fat to whole grains. Just 5% of their energy. That's all they need to do. And they might get a reduction risk. And it is only a risk. Right, it's not a certainty; it's just a risk based on a whole lot of statistics. So we know some of these things are nonsense, like these, which have got confidence intervals that cross 0. So there's a chance that if we instead of having saturated fat, we change 5% of our energy into sugars. Well, there's probably going to be no difference. It's just nonsense, right? It's the same as trans fats, just nonsense. Whereas if we change saturated fat for monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, or carbohydrates, then we do have a reduction. It might only be a small reduction, but we have a reduction nonetheless. So if you have Chris comes along and says, well, my study shows an increased risk when people don't eat meat, ask him about the risk values and ask him to quote the confidence intervals.
Yes.
So that's the main thing that comes from prospective cohort studies. Now, another thing that you mentioned earlier is funding sources.
Yes.
Funding sources are massive. Now, studies have to by law include the funding source. And it's usually written right at the end of the study. So just let me look at this one. And studies usually are funded, right? They're usually funded by, especially the big studies, they're usually funded by reasonably big organisations, right?
For obvious reasons, really.
Well, yeah, because it's expensive to run studies. So, they have to get funding to run the study, to pay participants, to pay the equipment, to pay the lab to do the tests and all sorts of stuff. So I'll share this one.
Not anymore, you're not, Kayla. You've just grassed yourself up. Right, let's bang this on.
Okay. Right, so this one is a study which looks good. Right? At face value, it looks good. Right? So it's looking at plant-based diets management in dyslipidemia, which is bad cholesterol. Right?
Right.
And the effects of plant-based diets on bad cholesterol. So you might come along and say, well, Chris, I've got a study for you about plant-based diets and cholesterol. And this is where you might fall foul of an issue that Chris might pick up. Right?
Okay.
So this is something that you need to be careful of, both in terms of what you take as evidence for yourself that you use for your own arguments, but also you can throw it back at them, right? As a possible flaw. Okay, so this is looking at plant-based diets, not vegan. It's just primarily plant-based diets. So it's Mediterranean diets and Nordic diets, right? So they're eating a lot of vegetarian food, but they've probably got some fish in there, but it's primarily plant-based diet.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it tells me good things, right? So this study, it's telling me that it is a review, so it's combining, it's looking at the effects of lots of studies, right?
Yes.
So here, for example, it's saying both observational studies and randomized control
trials.
There you go. Both those are showing good things about plant-based diets. That we've got here, for example, a review of total cholesterol was lowered by 0.2 millimoles. It's not very much, but still, right? On plant-based diets. And here we've got another diet that's showing some reduction here. So we've got a reduction of 11% on something or other. So potentially this is positive. You could read through all of this review paper showing all these positive things, not about wholly 100% plant-based diets, but you could still use it as evidence. You could say, these are people who are loads and loads of studies combined together. They've looked at the effects of Mediterranean diets and Nordic diets and vegetarian diets, and they're all showing good things, that it reduces the risk of coronary heart disease, it reduces cholesterol. And then you get to the end, and guess what? It's been funded by, or at least one of the authors is employed by, Upfield, which is a plant-based, it markets plant-based consumer goods such as margarines and spreads. So this has been funded by a company that wants people to buy plant-based margarine.
So it will always say conflicts of interest and then give.
Yeah.
Right.
So
okay.
It will go to right to the end, and usually it's at the end. Sometimes it's at the beginning, right? So, but you have to look for the author's contributions, so who the authors are and where they work, any funding. So this, even though this has not had any external funding, so you might think, oh, well, that's good. There's no external funding, right? However, the publication costs have been funded by Upfield. So they're lying. Even though it says they've not had any external funding, they actually have, because their costs have been funded by Upfield. And we can see here, they've admitted now a conflict of interest, that this is Upfield, which is a plant-based consumer goods company.
Right.
So they want people to go on to Mediterranean diets. They want people to go on to Nordic diets, because those types of diets, they say that, polyunsaturated fats that are in margarines are good, right? Now, so Chris might come along and say, yeah, but it was funded by a plant-based diet company. And then you have egg on your face, pardon, right? Because, but you should have known that anyway, because you should have looked.
Yes.
And you can tell that this is biased, because all they've looked at is fat. All they've looked at is the difference. They've not looked at the diets overall. They've just looked at the fat content of these diets. So one of the problems with nutrition studies overall, and I'd say this for any nutrition study, it doesn't matter which study it is, whether it's pro-meat, pro-vegetables, pro-nuts, whatever, they're all flawed in a way, because they only tend to look at one food group in isolation. So in that study, because it was funded by a plant-based margarine company, they want to look at fat. Do you know what I mean? Now, studies that are funded by the meat company, they'll want to look at the benefits of meat. Studies funded by the dairy industry will want to look at the benefits of dairy. So there's loads of ways in which researchers can get a study published, and it looks fantastic. That study, it had loads of references, it had loads of stats in it from loads of different studies. But when you look at it and you see who it's funded by, you think, damn, they've fooled me. Initially, that study fooled me. Initially, when I read that, I thought, oh, look, there's a new study out that's showing us that plant-based diets are positive. A new review study out. I'll use this one when I'm arguing with the carnivore. And then I thought, hold on a minute, I'll need to look at the funding. And oh, hey presto, it's funded by a margarine company that's a plant-based food company.
So first things first, as soon as you get if you want to look at a study and you want to use it, or you want to analyse somebody else's who's give you something, first of all, have a look who's funded it. That's the key thing to do first before you do anything.
Yeah. If it's a peer-reviewed study, so it's from a journal, and it's got figures in it, right? Whether it's a cohort study, whether it's a review study, and it's got figures in it, and so it's not just a letter or one of those opinion pieces that I showed you before, because you can already disregard those. And it's not an animal study, because you can already disregard those. So if it starts to look like a decent study, then look at the funding. Look at the funding. And if it's funded by, let's say, I don't know, any company at all, you have to be really suspicious, because that company has a vested interest. That company wants those researchers to find evidence in their favour, because they're not going to pay for something that finds evidence that disregards their product, are they?
So how does this work then? So let's say we've got Bolton University,
Yeah.
They're always going to need a bit of cash.
Yeah.
So some big conglomerate comes over, like Flora, okay,
Yeah.
and Flora come up to your biology students and say, "Listen, guys, we'll give you $250,000. Can you do a study on us putting buttermilk back into our products and it won't do any harm? Could you get us a fair?" Is that how they work? Is that what they say?
That's exactly how they work. That's exactly how they work. The whole system, Danny, is corrupt. The whole system from the ground up. The way we teach students, all the way up to the most highest ranking universities, especially the most highest ranking universities, the ones that want the multi-million-dollar grants, they're the most corrupt of all. Because like in that study that I just had on the screen, one of the authors was employed by this company. So one of the authors on the study, if they found evidence to the contrary, well, they're going to get fired. They're going to lose the job. So there's jobs on the line. There's careers on the line. If a multi-million-dollar company came up to me, right, and said, "I'll give you $1 million to prove that meat is good for your health," right, and they'd offer me $1 million. Now, it's not $1 million in my pocket, but it's $1 million for my university, and then there'll be some money for me. They'll probably pay me a salary, and they'd probably pay me a handsome salary. They'd make sure that they'd pay me more than my university did, right? So they're going to pay me a handsome salary for the I don't know, the duration of the study, however long that will be. They'll give my university a truckload of money, which will mean I'll probably get a promotion. All right, I'd probably get promoted to a professor, like overnight. I've seen it happen. I've seen somebody take a decent grant and get a promotion literally overnight. So there's jobs on the line, there's careers on the line, there's reputations at stake.
And there's people's health at stake as well.
Well, this is the thing. This is the problem.
This affects us.
This is the problem, that the whole system, like medical science, nutrition science, it's all corrupt. So what you've got to be able to do is navigate through all of these muddy waters, because there is some good stuff out there. There really is some good stuff out there, because you do have some studies that have not been funded by industry. They've been funded by, let's say, for example, the American Heart Association or the the NHS fund studies, right? I got like 800 quid, so it's not a million quid, but I got 800 quid, right, to help a sexual violence service out, doing an evaluation for them. And it was funded by the NHS. The NHS research people gave us some money, right? They gave us 800 quid each, there was 3 of us. And they had no vested interest. They had no vested interest in it, because they weren't funding this service, but they have like a certain amount of money allocated in the research funds to fund studies like that, just to see what's a good way to help people who've been sexually assaulted, right?
Yeah.
So they've got no vested interest. It didn't matter what I found. It didn't matter whether I found that service was good or bad, right? Because there was no vested interest for me. I was independent. I wasn't employed by this service. There was no vested interest for the people that paid me, the NHS.
Yeah.
It was just an independent evaluation. So some studies are truly independent. Some studies are fine, right? They've been funded by someone, but that's fine. That funding body is neutral. That funding body just wants to know what patients.
So they want to know the truth.
Yes.
They want to do something productive and positive.
Yes. There's always financial interest involved. So let's say, for example, like the American Heart Association or the NHS, right? They're getting money from Big Pharma, right? So they tend to fund studies that will provide evidence that certain drugs are good.
Yeah, of course. Well, we know this is in operation, don't we?
Fair enough, right? There's always money. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. There's always money involved, right? So the main thing to think about, though, is that those studies are going to be less biased than studies that are funded directly by industry, that are funded directly by a margarine company or funded by a meat company or funded by a dairy company. Those are the ones that are biased, and you can be sure that they will provide evidence in the favour of the people that's funding them.
Of course they will, because if you're putting £1 million into something, you're not going to want results that are going to make your sales drop.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? No way. It's obvious.
Exactly. So we'll just take one more.
Yeah.
Right, this one. Let me just check the funding on this one. Right, let's take this one, because this looks independent. For me, this looks independent. It might not be. Somewhere along the line there might be an issue, but it's better than the other one, right? So sometimes you're not sure. Sometimes you give them the benefit of the doubt and you take the results as they are. You could do a little bit more fishing into the authors. You could Google the authors and see who the work are. Sometimes if I'm not sure about something, I'll Google the authors. But this one looks better. Right, so again, this one's about the Mediterranean diet, and it's an intervention. So what they've done is they've got overweight and obese people, and they want to lower their cholesterol. They want to see whether the Mediterranean diet lowers their cholesterol and whether there's changes in the gut microbiome.
Okay.
Right? Not vegan, but it's Mediterranean diet. So in this one, there are some problems with it. So this it's an intervention. So they've got people to change their diet for a total of, I don't know, I can't remember how many weeks it is. Can't remember. I think it's 8 weeks. They've got people to change the diet. So you can tell that by looking at the method. So it'll label it method, and you can see here who the sample is. So they've got 82 overweight or obese people, and it's an 8-week dietary intervention. So they've got some people 40 people to do the Mediterranean diet, and then I think the other half, they just said, keep your regular diet. So it's not a randomized control trial, but it's better than it's low level.
You're still trusting people's honesty.
Yeah.
Obviously they want to get better, so they're probably going to stick to it. They're not going to run off and start smoking 26 a day. And
well, again, like I said before, it's low level because they've not looked at too many things. They've not considered all health issues.
Okay.
Right, they've taken some things on board, but it's not very good. So if you took this to Chris and said, look, I found this study in obese people, and I found that putting them on this primarily plant-based diet is good for them, he might come along and say, yeah, but it's only 82 people, so the sample size is low, and it's only for 8 weeks, and they haven't taken many variables into account. We know that there's 43 females and 39 males. We know they've got a BMI an average of 31, right? But what else do we know about them? Well, we know that they don't like exercise, right? It says somewhere that they're sedentary.
Yes, sedentary, yeah.
We don't know very much about them. So that's flawed, right? So Chris might say, well, we don't know very much about these people. We don't know whether they're all smoking. We don't know whether they're all, we don't know whether they're cheating. Now, the authors did try to work that out by looking at the gut microbiome, and they said that the gut microbiome should change if they're on the Mediterranean diet because they have increased amount of fibre. And it did. So they probably were on it. But what they actually looked for was changes in TMAO, which is potentially a risk factor for heart disease, although maybe it isn't. We don't know really. And yeah, we found that the Mediterranean diet lowers cholesterol in this population. So that's positive. But it's only 82 people, actually 43 people or whatever, who were on it. So, and we don't know very much about those people. So, although that's positive, and if we look at the funding sources, right, so it was conducted, so it was funded by the European Joint Programming Initiative on Healthy Diets. So you can kind of think, well, probably they're reasonably impartial, because they just want to find out what's healthy and what isn't. But we don't know. I'd probably have to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right? Not really sure. But the studies looks good, but when you dig into it, it's actually on a quite low level.
Yeah.
So there's what I'm saying, Danny, here is that you don't have to understand all of these statistics. You don't have to read the entire paper at all. I've literally just skimmed through these just to check that they were appropriate for tonight's conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But what I know is I can go to certain parts in that document and find key pieces of evidence. So I can go to the method and look how many participants there were. And if there's only like 82, that's not very good. And we don't know anything about them. Well, that's not very good either. So that's automatically lost some point, right? Even though the results are in the favour of plant-based diets, I'm not going to use that as strong evidence, because it's so easy to knock it over.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take that to a debate with a carnivore and say, look at this study. It shows that if you increase the amount of plants people eat, they'll say, no, they automatically throw it back at me and say, it's a cross-sectional study with 82 people. That's all. Right? So what you've got to do is go to the key places to check that a study is viable, that it's useful as evidence. And then if somebody throws a study back at you, you do the same. So look at the funding. First of all, these are I'll summarise now. First of all, check that it's a peer-reviewed study and not something from like a YouTube video or a blog, right? Like
a letter,
right? That it's actually peer-reviewed. Then check that it's an actual study, not just an opinion piece. Right. Then check if it's peer reviewed and it looks like a decent study, it's got figures in it and stuff, then check the funding. If the funding's biased, first of all, check that it's a human study, not an animal study.
An animal study.
Like that. Then check the funding. If the funding's from industry, then you know it's going to be biased, right? And then look at the actual results. So look who the participants are, look in the methods. If it's really low sample, if we don't know very much about them, we can say, even if the results are in our favour, even if the results are what I want to see, what I want to use in the debate, I'm not going to use that one because it's just too easy to knock down. So you want the bigger studies, and ideally you want those that are highest up in the hierarchy of evidence. The higher up in the hierarchy of evidence, the better. But do take into account that some studies, even if they look fantastic, they're going to be massively flawed due to bias, due to funding bias, due to other things like the results might show, there's an increased risk in heart disease in these people, but when you look at the confidence intervals, it's nonsense because they cross zero. Cross zero, that means that potentially it's meaningless. So those are just key things I look for when I take a paper for the first time. If I'm looking for research to use in a debate or to use in a video, those are the things I look for.
Is date
really in my head?
Is date relevant, or does it not matter? Can a study stand, like if I could something from 1989, would it still be relevant now unless somebody had? done something since.
It could still be relevant now. It could still be relevant now. But what I tell my students is, if you find the most recent evidence and work back, that's better, right? Because the most recent evidence will have probably picked up on some of the issues from the older studies, and may have found contradictory evidence. So if you take a study from 1989 and you don't look any further forward, then your opponent might come along and say that was debunked. That was debunked years. It was debunked in 2010, and there's been 20 studies since then that have all found opposing findings.
Right.
So instead of looking at the most recent stuff, really, to be honest, about, like Ansel Keys' study. I mean, people still quote, Ansel Keys' cholesterol study, but there's a whole generation of better studies now.
Yeah.
That are higher, that the more reputable, the higher level. And the thing is, nutrition science is so muddy. There's so much we don't know.
Yeah, of course.
And as I said before, what studies tend to do is just look at one nutrient. They'll look at fat, or they'll look at carbs, or they'll compare fat with carbs. They're not looking at the bigger picture, right? So that's a massive problem, and that is always going to be a problem, because you can't lock people up. Like, you can't lock them up in a lab for 20 years and research on them and control everything about their life. You can't do it. It's unethical. So we've got to work within the bounds of ethics, right? So there's always going to be opposing evidence. There's always going to be conflicts of interest. What we've got to do is piece together the best bits of evidence we can find. So, if you've got a finding that's repeated time and time again with different samples in different years in different countries, then you can kind of think, well, that's probably going to stand. That's probably the best evidence we've got, at least in this moment of time.
I mean, common sense comes into play as well, doesn't it? Surely, because if they've done a study and they got the same result, and they've done the study there and they've done the same result, and the same result keeps appearing time after time, okay, that stands. That stands. Yeah. Whereas if you keep getting different ones and different results keep happening, either the figures are being skewed, or it's not provable. It's not provable.
Yeah. So there are many areas in science where literally there's a conflict, because you can't find any two studies that show the same thing, and that's a problem scientifically, right? Scientific studies need to be replicated. You can't just take one finding and say, that's it. We've got to replicate studies. We've got to do them time and time again. And if it proves that a certain finding is robust, that it the same finding is found in this study, and then this study, and this study. It's found in Germany, it's found in Italy, it's found in Taiwan, and it was found in 1980, and it's still found in 2020. Well, actually, that's probably a robust finding. That's probably something that we should take notice of. And we do have a few of those out there in nutrition science, but it's open to a lot of interpretation, and that's why we need to be really clever in what studies we use as evidence for us, our tests, but also how easy it is to knock other people down by just looking at those key things.
Definitely, very useful. Listen, any questions now? Fire them over, people. Can you get the comments up, Michelle? I think you know how to click onto them, don't you?
Yeah. I've got
so, any questions by people? Give us a shout. You know that video you was watching with Tommy Kelly, my arch enemy, and there's another guy there with an eating disorder with Bart K.
Yeah.
I was listening to that in my wagon today, and I think I got as far as you did. And I'm thinking, my God, Bart's talking about our stomach acid. And I'm not going to ruin it for everybody, because I know you're going to do a reaction, and I can't wait to see your reaction to it.
I'm going to do it on Monday. I'm going to put the scheduler up.
Hello, Tommy Kelly here. Hey, I talk fucking shit. You know what I mean? It's like, my God. So Bart K is giving advice to 2 people with eating disorders.
Yeah, I know.
What the fuck?
I know.
And that is the worst thing. I mean, all right, Tommy gets on my tits, right? But I wouldn't wish anything bad on him.
Yeah.
You know? So please.
This is the thing. This is why these carnivores need calling out, because they're doing, you know, they're just trying to make a few pence off the YouTube ads and to get people to join the Patreon when they're doing huge amounts of damage to people.
Yeah.
By giving them advice and going on with people with eating disorders.
I sent
telling them to eat nothing but steak.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's
I sent a video to Chris, and it was Paul Saladino on this talk show, and I don't know what talk show it was, but he's got a nutritionist at the side of him with 20 years, the judge, and she says, what experience have you got? You're a psychologist, you're a psychiatrist. She slammed him, and Chris said to me, yeah, but he was calm. I said, yes, Chris, he's got to be calm because he's trying to sell a fucking book. Yeah, he can't be kicking off.
He's selling nutrition plans. He's making money off his YouTube channel, and he's been on Joe Rogan. So he's obviously got some kind of industry funding and stuff.
Kayla Corcoran, Lola, troll for the industry. More people knew who Abby Not So Sharp is, but didn't have a clue about Reagan Russell until she was put first and foremost in the news world up. Kayla Corcoran. You'll have to explain more than that. I've not heard of Kayla Corcoran.
You see it?
Hang on a minute. He's speaking to Kayla Corcoran. Yeah, right, hang on a minute. Yeah. Right, let's have a look what she's saying. I get criticism of very low fat, but when people eat nuts and avocado. Oh, right, hang on a minute. I was surprised Sean said something like great studies funded by the Erdurians. He says very suspect, though the anti-oil free seems to be personal. I think we're halfway through a conversation here. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah. Is there any questions?
We want some questions while we've got...
I've blinded you all with science, haven't I?
Everyone might be satiated with the knowledge now. And everybody's just jumped on Instagram and Twitter, and they're like, now, right, okay, send us that fucking study again now, dickhead, and let's have a look at it. Come here, let's see who's funded it. Let's have a look at your measurements. Show us the graph. I know how to whack that now. How many people were in that trial? What do you mean it was done on mice? Fuck off, done on mice.
There you go.
My ass.
The Gecko says, I was taught this in a module called Research Methods at university. I teach this stuff. This is my bread and butter. This is. So come on, ask. Research methods for over 20 years. This is the stuff I tell my students. So you've got a free lesson. You haven't paid $9,000 a year to sit in.
Exactly. Save $9,000, people. Ask the questions now. Get your notepads out. I'm taking this off as well, so you won't be able to use it. I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to charge for it. Let's have a look at this one. Bart's credentials. He was on as a scientist with 20 years in sports psychology and cardiovascular psychology. Yeah, Michelle's done videos on Bart.
I've done loads of videos on Bart. He does. He was a lecturer at university. He's got a master's degree in exercise physiology, so he can read a scientific study as good as I can, right? The problem with Bart is that he takes a very narrow view, and he'll only look at the studies that agree with him, which is very few, right? He thinks that he doesn't like systematic reviews, he doesn't like prospective cohort studies. He thinks even though he calls himself nutrition science watchdog, he thinks all nutrition science is nonsense. Just look at the debate. It's still on Bart's channel, I think, the debate I had with him last year. Right, I got him to say that all nutrition science is nonsense, which he openly says anyway. It's not that I pulled it out of him or anything. And he doesn't. He wants people to be literally locked up in a room for 20 years to prove any piece of scientific evidence.
Yeah, he said
so he's so narrow in his thinking. That's because he's got so little evidence to back up his claims. And there's stuff that I'm going to talk about when I do my live stream on Monday. The scheduler's going to come up. I'm going to rip him apart because he's talking bollocks yet again on a whole manner of things.
I mean, even
humans being obligate carnivores.
I mean, even me as a layman, Michelle, listening to that today, with the knowledge that I've slowly built up over the last few years, listening to your videos, even listening to him today, I thought, wow, that is absolute bullshit. That is, you know, it's you can hear it now. You don't need to be an expert. The gecko. How do you counter people who dismiss science as just theory and say things like what we knew 100 years has changed?
Well, because science progresses. So, yeah, there are theories. Well, what you do is you develop a theory and then you provide evidence to test that theory. So if you've got a theory that's got a load of support from different years, different samples, different countries, different methodologies all coming together to show a similar finding, well, you can say that theory has got tons of support. Like evolution is a theory, but it's got tons of support. It's got genetic evidence, anthropological evidence, even biological evidence, even psychological evidence in support of evolution. So even though technically evolution's a theory, I think it's pretty much a proven one, right? So yeah, it might just be a theory, but if it's got loads of evidence in support of it, then it's been highly tested and it's been proven that this is a well-supported theory. So let's go with that.
I mean, one of the things Bart said was about paleo man ate 90% meat. Yet there's a brand new study come out where they've managed to sample, because obviously all that's left from a caveman's campfire is bone. But the plant matter deteriorates. But they found ways to sample that soil, and they found out that no, hold on a minute, no, they're eating apples, berries, potatoes, grasses, grains. They're eating all sorts. So that's not true. And
they've analysed, I think they're called coprolites.
Coprolites, caveman poo, innit?
Fossilised poo, right?
Yeah.
And they found like seeds in the fossilised poo. So they know that early humans were eating plant foods, but also they can do carbon isotope testing on bones that they found. So the bones of the skeletons that they find, or bits of fragments of the skeletons that they find, and they find a whole manner of plant foods. It depends where in the world and at what evolutionary time point. So I'm going to go into all this in my.
You know, and the thing is, Michelle.
Bullshit.
I mean, we've not changed in attitude, and my reasoning is this, right? If I had to go to the shop to go and get a steak and it was pissing down with sideways rain, or there was a tin of beans in my fridge, I'm going to eat the beans, okay? So you're telling me that a caveman sat round the fire, nice and warm, with his missus there and his kids, and he's got a few seeds and nuts there in the corner, and his missus says, will you just go out in the snow and go and chase after an antelope for 2 weeks? He's going to chase after the antelope. Is he for? You know, you're having some nuts, love.
You don't chase after the pig in antelope.
It's just common sense.
No, thanks.
Exactly. Right. The vegan family, they're doing a stream in 10 minutes, so we've got last 10 minutes.
We'll wrap up in a minute.
The BDA stance on plant-based diet, is that system review, do you think? I don't understand that question. I think that's more for you.
I don't understand that question either. You'll have to rephrase it.
What's the BDA? British Dietetic Association stance on plant-based diet.
Plant-based diets is that.
Oh, right. Is that a system review, do you think? The BDA stance on a plant-based diet?
No, what they do is they take a whole range of evidence and put it together and then, make their best guess. So what a Dietetics Association will do is basically synthesize all of the knowledge, and there's really no vested interest for them to lie. Why would they lie? What would they gain in lying? All they do was make people ill, and then people would sue them. So why would they lie? It's like the NHS. Well, yeah, there might be some drug companies involved somewhere, but at the end of the day, they're making their best guess. So people like the British Dietetics Association, the American Dietetics Association. There's funding involved, but you know, we can believe them more than we can believe an industry funding study that tells us that meat's good for us. That's been funded by the meat industry.
Vane the troll, she doesn't stop talking about Bart. Well, Bart doesn't stop talking about her because he was doing his silly Charlie Witch accent on his stream. So, and Michelle's not going to stop talking about Bart until Bart starts sprouting his fucking dangerous bullshit.
That's why I don't stop talking about him.
Somebody asked me there, Michelle, about the Trevor Hiscox, the basic order of things to look for in scientific store. Can you put the pyramid thing up for him again?
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll get it off Michelle and I'll put it in the description as well, Trevor. Let's have a look at any more questions.
Alright, there you go.
Grumpy Vegan Grandad Dental Calculus. What the fuck? You're laughing, I don't know what he's talking about.
Go on, say the hierarchy.
5, I don't know. Right, so let's take that off.
You can get this off Google. So anything that's not in a peer-reviewed study, that's anything else, disregard it. Anything that's just an opinion piece and not an actual study, disregard it. Anything that's an animal study, disregard it. Anything that's low level, like the one I showed you before, well, it's all right, but I wouldn't use it in a debate. You know, it's 82 people. They don't know very much about them. Prospective cohort studies, yeah, they're good, but let's look at who funds them. Same with randomized control trials. Let's look at who funds them. Let's look at the actual results to check that they've not done anything stupid with confidence intervals. And then the very top, these are these review articles, systematic reviews and meta-analyses. These are the best of the best, but even them can be flawed because even if you have a systematic review or a meta-analysis, it can still be industry funded, and it's so easy to make those go in your favour. But we've not talked about them tonight. I've got a video on my channel about the hierarchy of evidence, whereas I go into the problems with meta-analysis. So go and dig that out. Just type in hierarchy of evidence in my channel, and it should. And I go through this very thing. I go through it all, and the problems with meta-analyses as well. Okay,
so we can get that.
Yeah.
Tommy Kelly, my good mate GVT. I do love you, Tommy, but listen, mate. When you have your first heart attack through eating all that meat, I'm going to go past your bed on a space hopper with one of those blowers. Right? That's a promise. I'm going to bounce past your bed. Like that. Up yours, Tommy. But no, Tommy, all good faith, mate. Don't you worry. I've got nothing against you whatever. But you are my arch enemy, you little bugger. Hello, my name is Tommy Kelly. How you doing? Right, any last questions?
Yeah, UK Vegan Family is streaming in a minute. Everybody head over to UK Vegan Family.
I'm not eating meat, you muppet. Right, no worries, mate. Listen.
You're still eating eggs and milk.
Yeah, you're still eating periods and yeah. Let's have a look. Grumpy Vegan Grandad, you're 5 minutes behind. It was to do with the testing of diet impair. Right, sorry, mate. Yes, I'm always 5 minutes behind. I live in the past, you know what I mean? So, right, well, listen, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on doing this with me. I have actually learned.
Good.
Now you've shown me. I'm not giving you £9,000. I'm not giving you 800 quid. Right? You'll have to send the boys in to shave my head, but I beat them to it. Listen, everybody, thank you for joining. Let me just answer this question. No, he's not. He's a twat. So thank you for coming on. Please go over now to UK Vegan Families stream. They're doing a lovely stream with Vegan Mooncat. And it should be great. But thanks for joining me. Thanks, Michelle, again. And we'll see you all soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.